good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today to talk a little bit about some information that we got earlier in this week. I apologize for interrupting so many vacations out there, but again, this is something we felt like we needed to get information out as soon as possible. I'm going to have everybody at the table to introduce themselves and their roles, and also two superintendents, or we have district finance officers, and we also invited directors of federal programs to be a part of this meeting. And of course, it's open to anyone that's within a district that wants to be a part of this. But we're going to talk about our roles. And then also, too, if you have a question, we're asking that you put that in the chat. We'll do our best to answer those at the end. But again, if you could just kind of listen as we go through and have those questions towards the end. If there's something that we can't answer today, we'll do our best to get to collect those and get back with you as soon as possible, because I promise you we have as many questions as you do. But again, I think we're going to be able to provide some guidance again as we move forward. And again, my name is Dr. Robbie Fletcher. I am the Commissioner of Education.
Matt Ross. I'm the Associate Commissioner in the Office of Finance and Operations.
I'm Karen Worth. I'm the Director of Budgets and Financial Management.
It's on.
Thelma Hawkins, branch manager in the Division of Budgets and Financial Management.
Okay, Matt, are you on the, may have to mute your mic. Okay. All right, we had a little bit of feedback on Thelma's there. Again, we'll go through the agenda to start out. We want to take some time to do a summary of the OMB and Ed Action, the Office of Management and Budgets, and the Department of Ed Action. We also want to talk about this, what the appropriations timeline. We are also going to go through the award requirements for state administered formula programs. We'll talk about some general rules about grant timelines and state administered formula, and then we're going to give you some LEA options. But please be advised, these options that we're giving you, though, it's up to the local district on how to proceed. Again, we'll talk more about that here shortly. But again, we want to make sure that we talked about some options as we move forward. Next slide. First of all, this started on Monday afternoon, a little bit towards the end of the day. We received an email from the Ed Department, US Ed, and basically what the email, you'll see a glimpse of the email, a snippet of the email. It says, given the change in administrations, the department is reviewing the fiscal year 2025 funding for the Title 1C, 2A, 3A, 4A, 4B grant programs, and decisions have not yet been made concerning submissions and awards for this upcoming academic year. Accordingly, the department, U.S. Department of Education, will not be issuing grant award notifications obligating funds for these programs on July 1 prior to completing that review. The department remains committed to ensuring taxpayer resources are spent in accordance with the president's priorities and the department's statutory responsibilities. And please notice what's highlighted there again, that they are stating that they want to complete a review before any funds, if funds, will be allocated to school districts and to LEAs. I'm sorry, and also to SEAs. In particular, this action, it impacts migrant education, which is Title I, Part C, supporting effective instruction, Title II, Part A. For example, a lot of districts may have staff that with professional development, may have district learning coaches, may have district resource teachers, but also two different programs as a part of the Title II, Part A. Again, that's dependent upon district. English language acquisition, which is Title III, Part A. And then a odd little addition here on our Title IV Part A is under student support and academic environment. Ed sent out preliminary allocations on May 30th, and it said that Ed would release the final Title IV Part A in June, and which will be the basis for the July 1, 2025 grant award. So hearing that Title IV Part A was being held was even more of a surprise to us than the others as we went through. So, but all of them, again, we were expecting this on July 1, or we had our high hopes. There is a little bit of good news. If you can find any type of silver lining, it may be a gray lining. I'm not sure if it's a silver lining. But for those of you that have the 21st Century grants, this will affect funds for the 2026-2027 school year. And Thelma actually educated me a little earlier today that the Title IV Part B funds, the 21st Century, those are essentially awarded in advance So you get those, all the funds for that is received and ready for the 2025-2026 school year. So for those of you who have 21st century programs, this directly impacts the 2026-2027 school year. So please keep that in mind as we move forward. Next slide. Just to kind of give you an idea of how many districts in the funding, you can see there with Title I-C, we have approximately $7.9 million, and that's 30 districts. We have Title II Part A, that's $33.6 million, and that's all 171 districts that are impacted. Title III-A, which is the English language acquisition, 5.8 million. That's 50 districts. The Title IV-A is 20.3 million, which impacts all 171 districts. And finally, again, as we talked about before, this is 19.4 million for 47 districts for the 2026-2027 school year for the 21st century learning centers. So again, we have this information. I think we released this in a press release yesterday, but if you want to, we'll have this, I think we're recording this so that if districts are not here today, they'll be able to watch this later on. Next slide, please. And with that being said, I'll turn this over to Matt Ross and he'll take us on to our next steps.
Thank you, Commissioner. First, we want to spend a minute here to talk about the source of these funds. So Congress appropriated these funds in a continuing Appropriations Extension Act. That was signed by the president, this president, on March 15th of 2025. So these are funds that were appropriated by Congress, and the period of availability for these funds, or the intended period for use, is July 1 of 2025 and through September 30th of 2026. With that tidings amendment, that could be extended to September 30th of 2027. But it is clear that these funds were intended for use during this school year and appropriated as such by Congress and signed into law by this president. So questions as to how this administration is withholding these funds. Per these acts, you can see that they require the administration to provide these funds. Title I uses the language that states are entitled to receive. Title II Part A, the ED shall allot to each state. Title III Part A, ED shall make a grant. And Title IV Part A and B, ED shall allot to each state. So the direction in law is clear that the administration or that the executive branch is to provide those funds to districts and states. There is a process called impoundment. However, that is a legal process, and this administration has not pursued that course of action to date. So these funds are just being withheld by agency action. So we wanted to talk a little bit about what happens if these funds are ever eventually released to states and districts. And whether or not you could, if you have certain, there'll be an example on the next slide, but whether or not you have programs or things that you need to continue during this period, but don't have the federal funds, could you use local funds? So to that aim, if ED eventually awards the funds, then LEAs will be able to use those funds to reimburse themselves for valid obligations made on or after the later of the following dates. The date the SEA may begin obligated funds, which is July 1, but we know no funds have been allocated or to the state, or the date the LEA submits the application to the SEA in substantially approvable form.
And keep in mind here, folks, what we're telling you is if, there's an if there, if USAID eventually awards these funds, we're giving you some options, but again, honestly, you're rolling the dice. This is a gamble. Mm-hmm. So if you look at using other funding sources, you can do that, but you are rolling the dice on whether or not you'll get this funding later on, and then you can reimburse, again, with some stipulations here. You can reimburse your district from the funds if they are eventually awarded. So again, we can't emphasize that enough.
So here's an example sort of to flesh out what we were talking about on the previous slide. So you have a LEA that intended to pay for staff for using funds from one of the affected programs. The LEA makes the decision that some of these positions are too vital to cut. So it's going to use its local general funds, reserve funds to support the positions until a more permanent funding source can be identified. If Ed eventually awards the funds and the LEA had submitted a substantially approvable application to the SEA, then the LEA should be able to reimburse itself for the positions, for those positions with the grants. And then CCSO has a bind that using other funds will not impact federal supplanting concerns. So you could use your local funds as long as you meet these conditions without endangering yourself of running afoul of supplanting. So a couple cautions about that example, right? The first caution is around the substantially approvable application. What does that mean? We all know that there are no allocations within the system, and so normally the system would open and you would have, follow your plans and start being able to seek reimbursement, right? So we have talked to CCSO about what substantially approvable is, and we're going to seek some further clarification from US Ed. We encourage districts, if you have not already done so, to go ahead and submit your district assurances within the GMAP system. And so we will try to provide additional information as soon as possible from Ed on substantially approvable. Some of the initial guidance we got said that it may be as substantially approvable, may be as light as submitting your assurances, but we want to double check on that. We don't want to provide any wrong information. And further, if you're going to use, seek reimbursement, any expenditure must be allowable under the terms of the grant. Then a big caution, I think the commissioner alluded to it or said it directly, it's a gamble, right? If you use your local funds to cover costs associated with the affected programs, thinking you're going to get those funds awarded and they never materialize, then you will be out those funds. So any decision like that should not be taken lightly. You should consider the full budgetary implications and proceed with caution. So another additional option is sort of the transferability of title funds. So if you have carryover funds, you might consider transferring those funds. We have an example on here. If you had Title II or Title IV carryover funds, then you could consider transferring them to another program within the same project year. So, and we also listed out some of the, Title II, Part A, and Title IV, how you can transfer those funds to different title programs. And then finally, we have sort of Kentucky's has an approved SEA waiver request. So following grants, the end dates were extended from September 30th, 2025 through June 30th, 2026. So if you have funds in any of these titles, then you can revise your GMAP and use those funds to meet needs during the 2025-2026 school year. That we do.
Again, we'll start with questions here shortly, but we want to take some time, first of all, to kind of set aside the supplanting issue. We also wanted to talk about the risks. If you take your general funds and pay for, there may be some things that you can put on hold, or you can maybe even start looking at cutting, and maybe some things you just feel like you can't do without. So what other funding sources are you going to utilize? Now, if you do that, there's no guarantee that these funds will come later, even though we're being told this is in a review process, if you will. A temporary review, I think, has been some of the language I've seen. There's no guarantee that these funds will be coming. We're talking about Title I-C, Title II-A, Title III-A, Title IV-A, and B. There's no guarantee that these funds will come at a later date. I wish we had better news to tell you, but again, we're just trying to let you know exactly what we know and try to give you an option. Again, the options are not good, in my opinion, because again, you are taking a gamble. Or your other options are to, look at cuts or look at, some of you may understand that these were grant funds, and maybe you did your pink slips based on what was there on May 15th or before. So again, just trying to give you some options to help out and try to answer questions that you may have. And again, we still have a lot of questions we're trying to get answered also too, but we'll do our best to answer what's there. Karen, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. The first question is, can you explain again what the impact is on Title 4A since we were already given a tentative allocation?
Mhm. So I think that they basically said that we had the allocation, but now they pulled that back. So that's no longer really the allocation, right? So
My understanding is as of July 1, those funds aren't there,
Yeah.
even though they were allocated, and we had amounts. The funds as of July 1, they're not there to utilize, or they're being withheld, if you will.
preliminary allocation.
It was
They
a
pulled
preliminary
back.
allocation that they pulled back. So again, we do not have Title IV Part A, or you do not have Title IV Part A, even though the preliminary allocations were on May 30th. And I think we're in agreement on
Yes.
it. You may want to pull that up. Thank you.
And the KDE website has been updated to reflect to be determined,
Okay.
because we had those posted on the website.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Has KDE spoken to the state attorney general about legal action?
We spent most of our day yesterday talking with CCSSO and other groups on what are next steps. As a matter of fact, we haven't even looked at how we're going to handle this at the department level. So we're still going to be talking about how we're handling this on department level. So to answer that, we have not talked with the Office of the Attorney General. We are in the process of getting the information out to our lawmakers and to the Attorney General to see what next steps would be. So there will be some communication with the Attorney General's office. It just has not happened as of yet.
Thank you. Title 1A is not included, so will that allocation move forward? Title 1.
Delmer?
Yes, the Title I Part A and Title I Part D Subpart 2 will be available in GMAP on Monday, July 8th.
And I'm assuming IDEA funds?
The IDA application opened in June, and I think most of those applications have been approved. And also Perkins, that application was available, I think, in March or April. They opened it up very early.
Thank you for that.
Appreciate the caution. However, dates have passed for staff notifications. Therefore, what options do we have for staff that have been hired for the 2026 school year?
I would recommend you talk to your board attorney about that to answer that question. That's probably the best answer for that. We've talked about things like reduction in force. We've talked about, was it part of the person's contract that this was contingent upon the funding being there? But again, I would really talk to your board attorney on what next steps are with the ideas of reduction in force. How did the contract read for if you have an employee that was paid? And then how do you take those next steps?
And like I said, we're going to follow up with information from Ed as soon as we get it on what constitutes that substantially approvable requirement, so that you could possibly use alternative funds to pay that and then try to reimburse that in the future if the federal title funds ever become available.
And to add to that, please know that we're not here to endorse one action or another. We're here to try to give you options, even though as bleak as they may be. I'm not trying to throw light on this or shed any negative light one way or the other on what you should or should not do. We just want to try our best to give you some options. And again, but knowing that each individual district, your budgets, what. Again, I am sure that every single dollar that you have is considered very important. But are there some things that you can either put on hold or some things that may be considered cutting or where do you have other fundings within that? And again, that's a lot easier said than done as in sitting in the seats of superintendents. These are not easy decisions. And again, we're just trying our best to offer some options there. But again, any steps that you take with personnel, I would move forward in talking with your board attorney as you move with those decisions.
We have another couple of comments just about the staffing piece and then the urgency to get further guidance on the plan approval and the reimbursement date. Any word on Title V?
No. No.
Seems like people are shaking heads no.
No.
So no word on Title V at this point.
Typically, once you move something to district funding, it can't go back to federal funding. What do you suggest in terms of staffing? The staffing question.
I don't.
Read it.
Typically, once you move something to district funding, it can't go back to federal funding. What do you suggest in terms of staffing?
So you're talking about if you move a personnel to others, moving a personnel to being paid with a general fund. Let us get a little more clarification on that question. I think that would be covered on this, not supplanting, but let us get a little more information on that question before we get back to you. And whoever submitted that, please send a copy of that question with some clarification to both Matt, Karen, or all Karen, Matt, myself, and Thelma, if you don't mind.
Due to the status of these funds being unknown, will KDE go ahead and release the Title I Part A application in GMAT?
Yes, the application will be released on Monday, July 8th.
Again, that Title I Part A application will be released on Monday, July 8th. Oh, thank you. July 7th. Yes, because, jumping ahead a little bit.
This question is just, this includes any FY25 unspent funds? I don't know, we may need a little bit more clarification on that question.
So the FY20 funds are the funds that which we received a waiver on. So those funds will be available until June 30th, 2026. We received an extension to extend the end date from September 30th, 2025 through June 30th, 2026.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The slide is up.
General Counsel Allen put in the chat that KRS 161.011 provides for reduction in force of classified staff for reductions in funding. So just as an FYI there. Can you explain again the transferring carry forward of title funds to other title budgets?
So the federal statute allows for transferring funds between several different programs. You cannot transfer out of Title I, but you can transfer in between several programs. And once you transfer, if you're transferring from Title II to Title I, well then those funds take on all of the roles of Title I. In GMAP, if you or on the allocations page under, I think it's KDE resources, there's some information about transferability there.
Can we still do cash, federal cash requests for K and L monies?
Yes. This will only, the funds that are pending, those title programs will reflect Project M.
M as in Mary.
Yes.
Okay. Is there any projected timeline from the agency regarding fund withholdings?
We haven't received any type of timeline of how long this may take, or at least as of this morning, we hadn't we received anything. So again, first of all, there's no timeline on the withholdings, and there's no timeline whether we will even receive the funding. Again, I do believe at some point that I'm hoping that we will receive those funds, but again, we don't have any timelines to report to you at this point.
Title V is typically in the GMAP consolidated application. Will the July 7th GMAP release include both Title I and Title V?
No, the release will only include Title I, Part A and Title I, Part D, Subpart 2. We have not received any information regarding Title 5, which is rural and low-income schools.
I have one more question in the chat, and it's, is there any impact to KYCL 5?
No, at this time, no. Year one funding for KYCL has already been released. We will not know anything until maybe September is when we usually receive notification regarding year two funding for KYCL.
To handle all of our questions.
That's the last question.
Again, we wish we had better answers. We wish we had a definite, timeline. Even if something like this, if funds were going to be withheld, it would be good to have a warning as opposed to on June 30th, and then something's going to go into effect on July 1. Even if it was something where we could, in the next 2 years, we're looking at a reduction in funding. That's easier for us to manage, but just for this to happen this quickly is very different. Again, we will be talking to the Attorney General's office and others about next steps. We'll be also being in contact with our friends in CCSSO and other state and nationwide organizations to see what some next steps are. If you have any questions whatsoever that comes up, please reach out to one of the people here at the table. I recommend sending those to Karen or Thelma, and then also making sure that Matt and I are CC'd on those. We'll do our best to answer those as we can as we move forward. But again, apologize for having to cut into some vacations. I know this was typically when I, as superintendent, would take a vacation. It was usually quiet, usually. But we had some celebrations last week. We did get the notice that we were going to be able to draw down the ESF, the Education Stabilization Funds, from ESSER funds for what, $54 million. So we felt good about going into the weekend, and then we come back, and then Monday occurs. So we do apologize as much as we can. But again, this is something decisions were made at the federal level, and we were wanting to work as quickly as we can to get information to you. And we do have a couple more questions.
Yeah. Can Title IV unspent funds be transferred to Title II for the same project year?
Yes.
And this doesn't impact 401L funds that have not been spent yet, correct?
Correct.
And then they're asking for the recording and the slides after that. So we can send
Cool.
those out.
Make sure those are available.
Absolutely. And we will make sure that the recording of the slides is available. All right. Any other questions going once? Twice? I do want to take the opportunity to thank the people at the table, and so many within the department that have worked so diligently over the past 24 hours to get this information to you as quickly as possible. Of course, our next steps we'll be talking about here at the department, some of our, so how this impacts us specifically. But we wanted to make sure we got out information to districts as quickly as possible. I hope everyone has a good 4th of July, and hopefully we'll come back next week and we'll have better information as we move forward. Hopefully we'll have funding to talk about as we move forward. So again, thank you so much for the time. And if you have any questions, please let us know. In the meantime, we do appreciate your being all in as always. Thank you.